Um, you're going to get that weird virtual voice. And then I am just going to take a minute to share some slides really quick to ground us in our space today. So just give me 1 second to pull those up and we will get going. All right, can everybody see my slides? Can I get a thumbs up with that? Awesome. All right, y'all. If you are new to this space, welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Kelsey. This is Equity and Justice in Collective Giving. Our season theme this cycle is all about supporting CBOs and being a good ally to community-based organizations, also known as CBOs. If you don't know Philanthropy Together, we are an initiative to grow and strengthen collective giving practices around the world. And specifically for this session, I would love to give a special thanks to the Kellogg Foundation as well as the Fidelity Catalyst Fund. And so with that, just some general housekeeping. Closed captioning is available. You can see the little CC at the bottom of your screen. And if you see a little swirly in the chat, that's probably me. We invite you all to keep your mics off unless prompted otherwise. This is a small group today, so it will be nice and intimate. Please feel free to drop questions in the chat. I'll be making sure that I'm keeping an eye open for that. And I know that Erinn is also going to make space for questions. This session is going to be recorded, so we'll be sharing it out. And of course, we would absolutely love to see you. And we recognize that for many of us, we're still taking meetings from home or our personal offices. And so please know that your kids, creatures, pod, or housemates are absolutely welcome. And I always encourage folks to have something to process your thoughts, whether that's a journal or a notepad or something like that. And so every session, I love to open with some invitations. And today I want to invite each of you to listen deeply, to embrace and notice any discomfort or tension that you might have, and explore those feelings. Where is that discomfort and tension coming from? Please feel free to take risks. Don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, because we know that this change work and this systems work is something that, we have to make mistakes to learn, to grow. And then finally, holding each other with compassion. I always like to say that social justice work is a practice. It's a work that we're going to be doing daily, and mistakes are going to be made along the way. And so why this series and why now? Here you can see a couple short numbers on the state of philanthropic funding in the United States. And of all the funding that our communities receive, only 8% goes to communities of color, 7% goes to rural America, 1.8% goes to women and girls causes, and 0.16% goes to LGBTQ causes. And for me, one of the reasons why I do this work is in part because of those percentages. I like to use the women and girls causes in part because I think it's just like such an easily stark number, where we know that women and girls make up about 50% of the population, and yet only 1.8% of funding is going to them. Something seems off there. And what's beautiful is that I believe that collective giving can be a solution to some of that inequity we're seeing, particularly when collective givers decide to give differently, which is part of the reason why we're having our training today. And here what you can see is that of collective giving groups that Philanthropy Together has surveyed, and I'll drop the research in our chat once I'm done sharing screen, 60% of collective givers have an explicit commitment to addressing racial and ethnic equity in their giving approach, and 38% prioritize funding communities disproportionately affected by inequitable systems. And what I love about both of these numbers is that what it shows is that people are wanting to see a difference in the way we give and who we're giving to and how we're giving, but as we can also see, there is room for growth. Additionally, I always like to ground folks and remind folks what is this about? What is this season about specifically? It's about supporting grassroots, our local community-based organizations. It's about building community with those organizations and with our neighbors. And within that, challenging the status quo, maybe acting as a first funder, creating systemic change and shifting power. And then finally, the other thing that I'm incredibly excited to share with all of you today is in tandem with this season, we have launched a community-based, a guidebook on supporting community-based organizations through your collective giving group. And Philanthropy Together, we have many other resources to share, but essentially this guidebook is going to be guiding us through the rest of the season. It can be a tool that you can pick up along this season and really sit with and think about how might we shift our practices towards equity, towards supporting our neighbors, towards supporting these local CBOs. And so with that, I'm actually going to stop my screen share and pass it on over to Erinn. Also, thank you, Isis, my colleague, for dropping those links in the chat. Appreciate you. And so with that, Erinn, I'm so excited for this chat and for you to lead us in this discussion about how to support CBOs and how to do it well. And so with that, please feel free to take the mic.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. Thank you, Philanthropy Together, for inviting me to have this conversation. I was really excited when Kelsey reached out because this is basically what I try to do with every single donor we support. And I will say more about who I am and what I do, but this is such an aligned topic. And I did have a chance to take a look at that resource, that new guide that you all published. It's fantastic. I had already created my slides for this presentation, and then I saw I was like, ooh, what else is in here? So depending on what kind of learner you are, if you're the reading type, that's going to be an amazing tool for you. And it's going to touch on a lot of the same points that I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to share my screen because in that way I can share a lot of more information with you. But also please I'm happy to be in conversation with you. Hold on one second. Can you see now? Yes, getting there. Almost. Okay, great. Let me just, jump right in, but feel free at any point if you want me to, linger a bit longer on a slide or have any questions. We're a small group, so just come off mute, be in conversation. And maybe just to foreshadow, I will likely ask you all as we go, maybe closer to the end, so you have plenty of time to think about it, how you are engaging with local organizations, what's working, what's challenging, and also what brings you to this conversation. I think that's something that, is relevant and interesting to the topic, and we all could learn from you probably as well. So let me start by introducing myself. I'm Erinn Andrews, the founder and CEO of GiveTeam. We do philanthropic advising. I am going to say a bit more about that, but just by way of background, I'm based in the Bay Area in California, and have been working in the strategic philanthropy space my whole career. Started a nonprofit to identify high impact organizations a while back at a time when Charity Navigator was the only evaluator. And I really wanted to challenge that model of evaluation. GuideStar acquired us. I then ran GuideStar's nonprofit strategy and developed the bronze, silver, gold, and platinum levels of distinction that organizations can receive. From there, I went to Stanford to run a research lab on effective philanthropy, where I was interviewing high capacity donors, as well as teaching and training financial advisors on how to better talk about charitable giving with their clients. So my background, I've looked at nonprofits, evaluation, standardization of data, donor challenges, effectiveness, as well as other professionals who work with donors who end up giving money away. So that's a little bit about my background. And then what brings me to GiveTeam and to this conversation. So this is a story that I tell almost at the beginning of every single talk I give. And this is the beginning story. Like, this is just the way it goes. What I found in the research that I was doing at Stanford, I interviewed so many different donors, and these weren't donors to Stanford, they just were, donors, all across the Bay Area and also across the country. And what I found was the journey, the path was pretty similar. What would happen is these individuals would, if they went to college, they would graduate from that college, and that college would ask them for money, and they would give money to their college. Then they would go out into the world working. They're earning some income. They attend community events. Maybe it's a cultural something they attend. Maybe it's something their friend invited them to, and they start giving to those groups because they had some experience with them. Maybe they run a race, their friend runs a race, they're given to their friends' races. Maybe they get married, if maybe they have kids, but if you have kids, you go to the zoo. That's just a given. And then you end up giving to the zoo because you've clearly appreciated that outlet for your children. Your kids then make their way to school, and then there's the school fundraiser. And so then you give money to the school fundraiser. And then all of a sudden you're in your 40s and 50s and you're earning money and you are raising your family and you're working and you're busy and you're giving away more money. And what happens in a lot of cases is some folks get to this place and they say, wait a minute, I just gave away 5,000, 10,000, 100,000, and I didn't even stop to think about it, whatever that amount is, depending on their income and their personal situation. But what they all have in common is it's not that these are bad organizations. It's not that they shouldn't give money to these groups, but it's not always fulfilling because it's reactive. It feels like it was because of an ask. They're on defense. They haven't decided, I care about women and girls, or I care about democracy, or I care about, supporting unhoused folks. Like they didn't sit down and say, this is what I care about. This is what I want to fund on purpose. And so it doesn't always feel great. So this was the challenge I saw that really emerged in my research at Stanford. And that led me to say, well, what can we do about this? How can we help folks move from this state of reactive giving toward more intentional, purposeful giving? It's like, okay, if we boil it down, it came down to three, the lovely magic number three. What are the three things that folks really need in order to be more effective, in order to have purposeful giving? So the first thing they need is to know what they care about. What do I want to fund on purpose? And this could be, I care about these communities. I care about these causes. I care about these geographies. It's articulating what they want to support purposefully. The second thing they need, how much am I giving? What's the vehicle? Am I giving cash? Am I giving stock? Right? All of those financial mechanics that enable, that is the giving part, but it's not the first part of the strategy, sort of the tools that can help you get there. And then the third thing they needed to know was who's out there doing this work, right? So which organizations are on the ground with those communities, in those geographies, supporting those topics that are important to me. So those are the three things that folks need. And what I found is most of the philanthropic advising resources out there are really targeted to the folks who are giving away many, many millions per year on up, right? So you have to be giving away many, many millions to be able to talk to somebody about what you care about. Now, the good thing about giving circles is you get to talk to each other. You actually do have a community where you can bounce ideas off each other and like think these things through. That's why I love community giving circles. But for just the individual people out there whose wealth is increasing and they're increasingly generous, most of them don't have access to those types of philanthropic advisors. And so that's what I wanted to create with GiveTeam, a different type of model of philanthropic advising for donors. And I call the top 2 to 10% of givers. There is a reason why I'm telling you all of this background, I promise, because what I'm going to do from here, I'm going to say what we do at GiveTeam, but then I'm going to lead it into specifically where the donors are when they come to us and where we lead them. And that is getting toward the sort of local community-based organizations and why that's a critical part of our strategy. So bear with me as I take you through this journey. Okay, so just so you understand what we do at GiveTeam, because this is a completely new model. I started GiveTeam about 2.5 years ago. we do philanthropic advising for donors who are giving away 10,000 per year, 20,000 per year, all the way up to about $1 million per year. Okay. So that's kind of their giving range. If you think about your giving circle, maybe you're giving away 10K, that's a common amount that a lot of giving circles give away. So that could sort of fit into this category. And these folks are looking to ramp up their giving. They want to be more thoughtful, more intentional. So the things that we do a 75-minute Zoom reflection session where we help folks build a charitable mission statement. What do I care about? What do I want to fund on purpose? That's that first piece of the 3 that I shared with you as what they need. A lot of times we're working with their financial advisor. And so we let the financial advisor take number 2, figure out budget vehicle, because that's what they that's the lane that they feel most comfortable in. So we do a reflection session, and then about a month later, we do a 45-minute delivery meeting where we present them with 9 to 12 usually local community-based nonprofits for them to consider funding aligned with their strategy. Because in my research, I found that donors had a hard time coming up with the clarity of what they cared about, and then had a hard time finding organizations. And so we're trying to solve for those pieces. We also offer an annual check-in. So anyway, that's the type of process that we have with donors. Okay, so the reason for saying all of that, I'll also just sort of say what we've done so far. So we really started engaging donors in June of 22. We've worked with more than 80 donors since then, advised on about 20 million in charitable assets based on the recommendations we've been giving. And we've worked with folks across, I think it's like 15 different states. So we work with donors all across the United States. We really focus on US-based giving because many of the donors we support are giving from a donor-advised fund. Okay, so one of the first things we do when we meet a donor is we ask where they've been giving so far. And interestingly, we actually don't want them to bring us receipts. This is a very important part of our process where we say, off the top of your head, where have you been giving recently? Because that's very revealing. They can usually remember a few organizations or relationships, but not all of them. And if they can't remember it, it's not meaningful to them. It's not fulfilling. It's not probably one they want to hold on to. So we start by asking that question. And I just want to show you some of the answers to where these donors are starting out, because most have been giving in some places. So get ready for a bunch of different names. These are real donors that we worked with, and they're grouped by category. So one to their local HOA, the zoo, their university. They went to 3 universities, and some political giving, right? So I'm going to just let you scan through this list, and I will also just, like, full disclosure, like, this was me and my husband. Like, we for sure gave this way when we were starting out for many, many years. Here are some more, right? So St. Jude, Salvation Army, Red Cross, Yosemite Conservancy, their church, the Cancer Center, Big Food Bank, SPLC, ACLU, PBS Foundation, St. Jude's, right? More, right? So look at all of these different organizations. And these organizations are doing great work, but you can also kind of see that they're, in some cases, a personal relationship, like a school that they went to or their kids' school, or something that's a lot more well-known, right? Some of these bigger name organizations. So I thought it would be really interesting to do an analysis of how big are these entities? Like because these are not local CBOs for the most part. Like, these are not local CBOs. So I said, how big are those groups? So here, just take a look. We've got 379 million, 8.1 billion, 100 million, 51 million, right? Here's some more. Look at those massive, massive budget sizes, right? And some more. So just sit with this for a minute and think about, there's nothing wrong with funding these groups, truly, but most folks don't realize, or they don't think about the fact that they're giving $100 or $1,000 or even $10,000 to some of these groups. It's not really changing the trajectory of these groups, right? These groups are so massive. They have really outstanding development staff. They've got incredible marketers. They're taking out ads. They're taking out commercials. They are out in the world. You've heard of them because they are paying for that outreach and marketing. And so they're getting lots and lots of donations, small, medium, and large. If you weren't to fund them, would it break them? Nope. You know, and again, I never tell a donor not to support something they want to support. That is not at all my purpose. But everybody has finite resources, and I think it's more fulfilling for donors to be able to right size the impact of their gift, if at all possible. And when you take a budget and you divide it into smaller bits, you're just not going to have as big of an impact on some of these massive, massive organizations. So then the next thing I thought that would be interesting to do with this data set was say, okay, well, let's look at some of the big donor advised fund sponsors and see where most of the dollars go from those DAF accounts. All right, Fidelity Charitable, largest DAF, national DAF sponsor, donor advised fund sponsor in the US. Here are the most popular according to, I believe it's according to the number of accounts that donated to them in 2022. You can see Doctors Without Borders, St. Jude's, and World Central Kitchen were the top three. What's been removed from this list, which would have changed the top 20 ranking a little bit, are education institutions and religious institutions. So those were scraped. What you see here is Doctors Without Borders received support from more than 12,000 donor advised fund accounts, St. Jude's 9,000, World Central Kitchen 7,500, and the others anywhere from 3,000 to 7,500. Separate DAF accounts funded these groups. This doesn't say dollar amounts, but this just says number of accounts, okay? So let's sit with that for a minute. So look at this list, right? I mean, I work in this space, so I recognize this list, but I think most people recognize the majority of organizations on this list. Again, big marketing and development budgets, right? Okay, so let's now see how big are these organizations, right? So here's that same list, and these are their most recent annual budgets. 2.2 billion, 441 million, 2.9 billion, 3.7 billion, you know? So it's pretty significant. Nothing less than what, 74 million? Is that the smallest one here? Yeah, okay. Those all constitute massive organizations. Okay, next thing I thought would be super interesting. What if we layered over my donors? Have they supported any of these top 20 organizations? There they go, all the blue ones. So about half. When I looked back at that list, I said, okay, how many of GiveTeam donors before they came to us were supporting some of these top 20 organizations? And about half are. It's just not that surprising, right? I think the other thing I want to layer into this conversation is I mentioned that we support donors who are giving away at the upper end $1 million per year. That is obviously a significant amount of money that somebody might be giving away. All the way down to folks who might be giving away 10K per year. But we did an analysis of their giving level by their net worth. And I think it's just level setting to sort of see those points of comparison, because you're sitting here and you do whatever level of giving you do, and you have whatever level of net worth you have. And just to see that these are not necessarily massive giving budgets tied to massive net worth. So let's just look at this for a second, if you will indulge me in this deep dive on data, because I love it. Sorry, it's a little fuzzy, but so these are the donors that we've supported that have a net worth of 1 to 5 million, okay? And these are their annual giving budgets. So one of them, 5,000 per year, 7,000, 10,000, 10,000, some outliers. Yay, look at that cool outlier. But for the most part, you can see that, okay, that's kind of interesting. The average across those is 25K. However, that one outlier does skew things quite a bit. So I just thought that was kind of interesting, okay? So then let's look at this next one. This is 10 to 25 million net worth. This is total net worth, not liquid net worth. We got somebody in there giving 5K. Come on, you can do more. All the way up to 1.2 million. So what a range, right? Lots of different data points here. I think one of my big takeaways is, first of all, this doesn't give us insight into their life stage, their other assets that might be inheriting, or maybe they're older, and like there are lots of different reasons why these numbers look this way, and the full story is not here. But what I think is super interesting is in 1 to 5 million, also in 10 to 25 million, we got a lot of people giving in this 10 to 50K range, right? I'll show you the higher levels as well, just because I think it's, interesting to see, because we work with donors all the way up to 50 million plus, because for us, it has nothing to do with your net worth. It has all to do with your giving level. Well, how much are you giving away? How can we support you in giving that money away? So this is the next tier up. And those giving ranges, and then for the 25 million plus, most of these are actually 50 million plus. And so you can see, yeah, of course, the giving level does increase, and there again are some outliers. But I think one of the big takeaways for me is the fact that when you look, no matter how much money you have and how much you're giving away, there's a finite budget. You have a finite budget. And when somebody has a 50K charitable giving budget, they are not giving that to one nonprofit. They take that and then they divide it up into 3 causes, and then they give that to 3 organizations in each cause, or whatever it might be. So because you're dividing up those dollars into smaller and smaller amounts, I think it's even more important to think about the impact you can have with those specific resources. And I want you to be thinking about the size of the organization you're funding relative to the amount of dollars you could be moving to them. So that's why this part of the conversation is so relevant and important, and why we think about it a lot. So one of the questions is, why do we see this pattern of donors giving to these really big organizations? And all of the donors we work with, they're good people. You know what I mean? Like, these are generous, kind, well-intentioned folks. They want to make a difference. They want to do good. But for the most part, they have these same 3 barriers: trust, time, and awareness. So let's look at each of those. For trust, one of the things that I hear from donors is they don't know if they can trust a new organization. And if they've heard of an organization, usually that means or gives them permission to feel like they should be able to trust it. They've seen it on the news in a positive way. They've seen an advertisement for it. Their friend gave to it. Their company gave to it, right? So usually they're looking for some kind of signal that this is trustworthy, because unfortunately, the few bad apples that cause big news scandals, and we hear about it, those can then overshadow all the good work that the rest of the nonprofits are doing, the vast majority of them. So when I think about this with individual donors, again, the donors we're supporting are not giving like 5 million to one nonprofit. Okay, let's maybe do a little bit more due diligence, go a little bit deeper. Let's really hope there isn't a scandal for that level. But I'm sorry, if you're giving 10K or 5K or 50, you know what I mean? Like, how much do we really need to worry that in the off chance, the 0.0001% chance that something, you know what I mean? Like, we don't need to, there's just this obsession with worrying about scandals. I think there are ways that we can give responsibly, and not have to have that be such something overshadowing the conversation. But people do worry about trust. So how can we help them get past that trust piece? So that's one. Time is another real issue. Most donors just don't have the time to look for new nonprofits. And if they do, they frankly, in many cases, don't know what to look for. When donors come to us, they talk a lot about Charity Navigator and how do we know that the dollars are going to the programs and the people. So I spend a lot of my time re-educating and helping them think about what kinds of questions they should be asking, or they could be asking, because that's a fine question maybe to eventually ask, but I would prefer to first know who are you serving in the community? How are you serving them? What problems are you solving for them? How are you doing that in relationship with them? That to me is more important than exactly how many dollars go to fundraising versus programs. So time is a real issue, and then awareness. Many of the smaller, leaner resourced and community-based, often local organizations don't have the capacity or money to do outreach. They might not have a development staff member. They might not have money to take out ads in Google. They might, be so leanly resourced that they're not updating their website all the time, and these things can hurt them. So when we're looking at organizations, we're looking at their websites. Lots of donors are checking Charity Navigator, social media, GuideStar, Candid, and a lot of lean resourced organizations are disadvantaged in this process. So we also do a lot of teaching to help them understand their website might not be up to date. A lot of times following them on social media might be the best way to stay in touch with them and see what they're up to, because they might be updating that more often than some of their other profiles. But even Charity Navigator reports often disadvantage smaller organizations, because many of those organizations don't know how to fill out that report in a way that makes them look good, right? There isn't always awareness or resources to be able to do that. So these are some challenges that I see donors have. So what I'm hoping to do with GiveTeam and with my work is solve a lot of these problems for the donors. Provide them with recommendations they can trust, save them time by being the one to suggest a few organizations that they wouldn't have otherwise come in contact with, they wouldn't have been able to find. Our model is to focus on community-based giving, and there are two main reasons why we do this, and I'm going to lay out a few others that I think are relevant, really especially to this conversation. So the first is when I mentioned that the donors who come to us, they've mostly been giving reactively. And in order to move from that place of defense to offense and move toward intentional giving, it can be helpful to get to know a local organization that you can go to and see and feel and touch and experience and support in that way, than to give to some of these really big national, international organizations where you won't necessarily feel that personal connection. So from a psychological standpoint, that can be really effective to look to local community-based organizations to get involved in. So that's one that we say. And then the other really has to do with right-sizing your gift. So I'm just going to say these are just really surprising. They're not surprising. They're just really incredible statistics. The fact that 97% of all 1.5 million or however many nonprofits there are under 5 million in annual expenses. 92% are under 1 million and 88% are under 500,000. All of the organizations on that Fidelity charitable list are not in this percentage here. Like, they're massive. All the organizations my donors were funding before they were working with us are not on this list, right? So there are so many organizations out there that donors have no awareness of. How can we get them in front of more organizations like that? So that's one of the other reasons to really promote community-based giving. The other one that we talk about is right-sizing the impact. So helping dollars go farther locally compared to nationally, when you have, when you're taking that 10,000 and you're dividing it among multiple entities, those check sizes get smaller and smaller. To give 5,000 to a local smaller organization is going to go so much farther than if you give it to that big national, international group. Kelsey and Isis, one of the visuals in your cool guide was this. I stole it for the purposes of this talk. I love this. Thank you. Another plug to check out that resource. But this was just such a beautiful way to show, like, 5,000 to an org with a 50K budget, 5,000 to an org with a 500,000 versus 50 million. Like, look what percentage of their budget you can be supporting. That's exciting. Like, that's motivating. Like, 5,000 is a beautiful gift, whether it's from you individually or a collective, giving circle. But to sort of right size your impact, that's really motivating and exciting. So that's one of the big reasons. The other two reasons that I think are also super important, and some could say this is the most important, but really local organizations that are from the community, serving the community, they understand what the community needs. Not me, not that other funder over there, but the people who are actually from the communities that they're serving. And so, being able to support those types of entities to best support those communities. And especially great when nonprofits have feedback loops from the folks that they're serving as well. And then lastly, having those sort of ripple effects of being able to support your local, you're supporting the staff of nonprofits, you're improving the quality of life for the people in your region. These, to me, are all really great reasons to support community-based giving. I want to give two examples from clients we worked with where there were just sort of interesting conversations around this. One was, and that might paint a picture for a slightly different model. So we were working with a client couple in Boston, and they had three topics they wanted to fund, and one of which was Black maternal fetal health. And this was really important to them. But they realized that while it's not an issue in the state of Massachusetts, it's a much more acute issue in the Southeast in the United States. So we were able to find them local organizations working in the Southeast. So here, we're not going to be able to find an organization that they can see and touch and feel firsthand, but it hits all of these other reasons for how they can have a really big impact, right sizing the size of their gift, getting involved with an organization that's deeply embedded in the community. So that ended up being a good strategy for them, because when we think about local, the way I think about local is usually it's your local, but I don't really just mean your zip code, because a lot of donors live maybe in a wealthy zip code. I'm not saying you must only, fund within the, 2-mile radius of your home. I think of it more like a regional mosaic of communities where, the Bay Area, there are so many different counties. Pick a metro and then go a few hours in any given direction. To me, that's a local region. So it's not that just your one zip code, which may be more affluent. There could be some neighboring zip codes that really could use that support. And that still is something that you can go and see and feel and touch and be part of. The other example I was going to give is we worked with a couple in the Bay Area, and when they were sharing what they wanted to fund, they said, yeah, we're thinking about funding this at the national level. And I said, oh, is there a particular reason why you're thinking that scope? And they said, well, and by the way, they had been giving away 50K and they were about to give away 200K. So they were ramping up their giving. And they said, well, there's so many far wealthier people in the Bay Area, and we just assume that they've funded everything that needs to be funded here. So we think our dollars could be better spent elsewhere. I was like, oh, hang on just a second. Actually, those really, really, really wealthy people, they're all doing the big national, international plays with their many, many millions. And in fact, that's created this pretty significant need in certain pockets within the Bay Area that are underfunded, and they had no idea. And so they're like, whoa, then let's focus regionally. What can we do here? And so we looked at the Half Moon Bay, and we looked in San Jose and a whole bunch of regions, not their exact zip code, but within striking distance. So sometimes it's just helping donors understand that there very well could be a pretty significant need in their community, and they just don't always realize it. for when we come up with these recommendations, what we do, and so I think there's going to be a future webinar on this topic specifically, just to give you a sense of what we do. We build local regional databases of nonprofits all across the country in order to come up with these recommendations. And we do this by looking to a region's thoughtful grant maker, which includes giving circles, to see who they are funding. Are they first funders? Do they fund with a justice and equity framework? What type of grant making profile do they have? So we're pulling those grantees into our database so we don't have to burden the organizations with yet another grant making process, but we can benefit from knowing who has been vetted to whatever degree that they want. And what this has allowed us to do is our databases, 70% of the organizations are under 5 million in annual expenses, 40% under $1 million, and 10% are fiscally sponsored, which is often a proxy for size of organization, not always. So we are very intentionally trying to connect donors with these local community-based organizations. I thought it would be kind of fun to show you a smattering of the really cool organizations we've found for donors across the country, just to get a flavor for who's out there. So think about, all of the big brand name ones you've heard of, and the institutions and the research hospitals and things like that. They're doing great work, but what about these other really cool groups? So Esquire Apprentice is in Oakland. They have a pathway to training folks to become attorneys through apprenticeship, which is super cool and niche and specific. And I didn't even know that was a pathway before learning about this group. And by the way, all of these are groups we've recommended to donors and many of whom have supported. The Chica Project in Boston, yay, if you know any of these, give it some love. They're doing awesome work to build a world where women, girls, and all people experiencing oppression can reach their full potential. So what I've put here is their cause category, their expenses, their location, their mission, and their EIN. And some of these are fiscally sponsored as well. Here's one in Portland, focused on environment and climate change, growing gardens in schools, backyards, and correctional facilities. Here is Recovery Cafe San Jose, supporting folks who've struggled with addiction, homelessness, and mental health, providing them with safe communities. Feed Black Futures in Oakland is focused on food justice, providing food sourced from Black and brown farmers impacted by parole, probation, and or caring for incarcerated loved ones. They're doing awesome work. A group up in Seattle, Camp 10 Trees, creating experiences, summer camps and things for folks, youth of LGBTQ and non-traditional families. In Ocean Shores, Washington, look at the expense sizes on some of these people. This first one was fiscally sponsored. The second one, 41K. This one, 152K. Gray Harbor Youth Works, helping folks with vocational education attain a livable wage. The AFIA Center in Dallas, focused on reproductive justice. I have 2 more pages, and I was so hard to pick. I just want to share the love here, because it's just, these are amazing organizations, and there are so many more. This just begins to scratch the surface. The Latino Cultural Arts Center in Denver, Colorado, 800K, celebrating and activating Latinidad. The Ella Project in New Orleans, providing pro bono legal services for artists of limited means. So cool. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, focused on reproductive health, the Birth Equity Initiative, trying to change the outcomes for the Black and Indigenous communities in those areas. The Launch Pad, focused on mentoring in Prescott, Arizona, to incite teen confidence and empowerment through education and engagement. I think this is my last page on organizations, so wouldn't it be fun to just do this for the whole hour? This one's in Ready to Succeed in Santa Monica, focused on sending first-generation kids to college Angel City Sports, also in LA, supporting children and adults and vets with physical differences through sports. Vida Verde in San Gregorio, providing free environmental learning experiences for kids who otherwise don't have those opportunities. And one of my personal favorites that my giving circle supports every year, ALAS, focused on supporting the coastside farm workers and their families with a wide range of supports. So I just wanted to share the love of what some of these groups look like. And my last slide before I open it up to questions, I just wanted to share some of the specific quotes that we captured through these conversations with donors as they go through this process. So you can see what these were unprompted. Like, we did not say, tell us about large versus small organizations. So this one says, I've always just given to large organizations because that's all I knew. But after talking to you today, I am open and excited to start supporting smaller local charities. Impact is important to me, and I realize now that giving to smaller local organizations will let me see their impact up close and personal. Maybe I'll even volunteer. This donor said, I'm really excited about these nonprofit recommendations. We're so involved in our church, and it's great and that's fulfilling, but to reach other people in our communities, possibly get involved in that way and possibly introduce our church people to these organizations, because we're looking to partner with local organizations. So see that ripple effect of, didn't know how to find them, but here they are. And oh my gosh, these are amazing. How can I, better support them? The entire process was inspiring. It's expanded how I think about my giving. In the past, I focused on large organizations, but now I will have access to small organizations that have a meaningful impact to their mission and are aligned with my values. And I swear these were unprompted and I did not write these quotes. This next one, I'm hoping GiveTeam can introduce me to, this is on the front end, what they said they're hoping for. They came to it saying that this is what I need out of this process. New organizations that are smaller and more community-based. And then after we presented, the group, she was like, it makes me wish I had more money to give away because they're just so incredible. Last few, when I became president of this family foundation, our budget was $250K. It's quadrupled in the last 4 years, which is overwhelming and a privilege. Feels good to have goalposts and a clear vision. It's thrilling. I've only heard of Urban Tilth. Of the 16 that we gave her, this is exactly what I'm hoping for. And 1 month later, she said she's funded all 16. And they're all local community-based groups in her region and in her brother's region. And just, others just really excited about being able to get involved more locally. So that's what I wanted to go through with you. I know y'all have been saying things in the chat. I can't present and read the chat at the same time. So I'm going to end my screen share so I can see whoever's left with me, see what folks have shared. Maybe Kelsey, you can help me navigate anything, but just come off mute. We're a small group, so happy to have a conversation for our last few minutes.
Absolutely. Most of the chats, just so you know, Erinn, were from me, like resharing the toolkit, things like that. Also, I live in Boston. Chica Project is great. We love Chica. There is a question in the chat from Guff. And folks, if you have other questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat or come off mute afterwards. I know I have a follow-up question too. Guff is interested to know if your databases are available to the public. Specifically, Guff wrote, I'd love to see funder partners and grassroots organizations in my community so I can connect, engage, and learn alongside them.
Thanks for that question, Guff. They're not currently public, but I love working with people. So we should just set up a call or tell me what your area is and what you're doing. And I bet you know organizations that should be on my radar and vice versa. So really happy to be collaborative. So feel free to reach out. I'll drop my email was up on the screen, but I can drop it in the chat too. Carrie, I see your question come in. How do CBOs get on our radar? Yeah, the GiveTeam. Can't talk and type at the same time. There it is. CBOs. So we go out of our way to scan who's out there, which of course isn't going to capture everyone. And that's how we bring nonprofits into our database, by seeing who the local thoughtful funders are, who they have funded in the last few years, those grantees, that they come into our database that way. on our website, we have a way for nonprofits to say, hey, I'm over here. Do you know about me? Because we can't possibly get everybody. And we want to have a way for organizations to let us know about their work. So if you have organizations that you think are doing great work, send them to our website and they can request to join. And we'll check and say, turns out you're already in our Boston database, way to go. Or if you aren't, then send me these 3 pieces of information and we can likely add you. So very good. Isis, you had a question.
Yeah, I would love to hear, I think a lot of us who work in giving circles, there's the easy way to say, well, our money can go further, but there's so many other reasons, obviously, to fund CBOs as well, like their efficacy and the roots in the community that they have, and the cultural context that they might have that large national organizations don't. And I'm just curious, as you've done all this work with donors, beyond the your money can go further argument, what are the top things that you find really sort of awaken a light bulb moment in people that they want to start funding CBOs? And I'm thinking about this with the lens of giving circles who might previously have funded more larger organizations, how they can help their circle go through that change management process of moving more towards CBOs, but that might take a little bit of discussion with their whole circle. And what are the proof points that some of these leaders on the call today can lift up?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say it is, we certainly posture like on our website when we talk to people, like this is how, like this is a really fulfilling way to give locally, give, to local organizations. So we do that overtly, whether or not people see that. But in the actual conversations, it's a little bit more subtle sometimes because it's a discovery process. We're sort of listening and learning. What do you care about? What's important to you? And then they say certain things and we say, well, we need to have like, let's not cast such a wide net because then, it's too hard to narrow down the ocean. But like, let's pick a few things. Are there certain geographies? And then usually it's like, well, mine or my state or whatever. If they do really say like national, international, I'll say, would you be open to me sharing with you some local opportunities? Would that be okay? If like maybe there'll be some national and some local, would that be okay? So we have them, they always say yes to that. Nobody said no. And then what happens is when I present, this is where the real magic happens. I'm just doing the picking and choosing because then when I present the organizations to them, that's when they fall in love. And they just so happen to be local community-based tiny organizations. But they feel it because I'm saying, look at this thing that they're doing and the problem they're solving. And a lot of times these organizations will say, they'll quantify the problem. X number of children are experiencing abuse in our community, or this many, like this many kids are under reading level. They will quantify it and then frame that out for here's how we're solving for it and here's what we've done. And so that they fall in love with these organizations through that process. So it's exposure, but it doesn't even have to be an overt like, I'll convince you to give locally. It's like, this is what you care about. Look what they're doing right here. This is so great. How, like, wow, let's go support this group,
Thank you, Erinn.
I have a related question if we're not out of time. I'm just curious, Erinn, how you advise donors around trust-based giving versus, maybe restricted giving in the name of measurable impact and outcomes, and kind of that tension, especially when you're thinking about, giving locally, because I get the idea of right sizing impact, but maybe along with that, donors are feeling like, there's a certain level of trust you can have in a larger organization, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say that I'm always teaching trust-based philanthropy practices, usually at the end of the delivery meeting, where here are the groups here, and then I have here's 5 things that are best practices. I frame them as best practices. I don't use our sector jargon, but just say like this is the way good donors show up, and they all model trust-based philanthropy practices. Almost all of them resonate with donors. Some do. Lead to really interesting conversations about anonymity sometimes, or restricted gifts or things like that. But in many cases, I'm debunking myths, and they realize, oh, I didn't realize that if I give anonymously, they're going to spend so much time and money trying to find out who I am, even though my culture says to be humble and not share who I am because I don't want the recognition. So they're like unintended, you know, there's some tensions there. So we are teaching those types of things. I would say the biggest one I have to like walk people back from is related to Charity Navigator. And if I know somebody thinks they think Charity Navigator is what they need to be paying attention to, I will check the organizations I want to recommend against that. And if I see a lower score, but I still want to recommend them, I then teach the donor why I don't think that's a problem. I'm not worried that they forgot to put their whistleblower policy on their website. I'm not worried that they don't have an audited, 990 because they're so tiny and they don't need to. I'm not worried about these things. So I think you shouldn't either. I would happily fund this group and I wouldn't think twice about it. So I do have to do that damage control sometimes.
Thank you.
I know we're at time. Wrap us up.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much, Erinn, and thank you all for joining us today. This was truly a delightful conversation. Before I close out, Erinn, if you were to give just some like quick down and dirty, how you bring folks along on this journey, because we know so many of our folks are working to bring folks along and are getting those hard questions. What are like the 3 key things for bringing your friends along on this journey with you?
Well, the first way I think about that is, and maybe it's not bring your friends along, but if you are ever in conversation with somebody, it could be a friend, it could be you're supporting a donor, whatever, listen. I mean, honestly, listening, I think, is the biggest, most important tool. So much of the that first hour I spend with donors is listening deeply to what they have to say and reflecting it back in a way that can move us toward action. So I am not, even though they are moving in the right direction, I am not imposing my belief system on them, but I'm teasing out, you do care about this. You see, you just said that. This is important to you. You want to help people who don't have these same advantages, right? So get them into help donors, friends, whoever, be vulnerable enough to share with you, knowing you will listen without judging, and then help them toward a path that helps everyone, the organizations that can solve those missions and accomplish those things, and that the donor would feel good about too. And I guess the other piece is helping people move along, thoughtful recommendations, right? So if you know that a donor or a friend is stuck or challenged, if you can solve that for them, you're more likely to remove that roadblock and move them toward action. So maybe those would be I'll leave it with those 2 pieces.
All
Listen
right.
and remove roadblocks.
Love that. What came up for me was like listening lovingly, recommending with intention. So with that, thank you all so much. It was a delight to have you all here today, and we will hopefully see you for the next session of Equity and Justice in Collective Giving. We cannot wait for you all to join us. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye, y'all.